So we've talked about Apple a few times before. So before we start, there's a question I want to ask you.
Okay.
Do you or have you ever owned an Apple product?
I had an iPhone 4 that my brother gave me, and it broke when I dropped it. Taking things that have already been invented and slapping their logo on it is pretty much the modus operandi of Apple at this point. As such, I think it's important to remind people that Apple as a company once released a computer so bad it failed literally 100% of the time. The Apple III.
Karl, how is it possible that somebody would release a computer that failed 100% of the time?
Well, I can answer your question with 2 words, Brad, and those 2 words are Steve Jobs. To explain, according to technicians tasked with designing and building the Apple III, Steve Jobs insisted that the computer had no vents or fans of any kind, so the computer would be entirely silent.
What a genius.
Yeah, what a visionary genius that guy was, isn't it? I want a computer without fans or vents. And if people are wondering, why is that such a big deal? Just feel the bottom of a laptop after it's been sat on your knee for like, an hour or so. Just feel the back of your computer and feel all the heat coming out the back of it. That's fucking why. And those are like computers that have had like an entire 2 decades of technology extra put into them, and they still overheat. So as you can imagine, the Apple III was massively prone to overheating because it had literally no way of venting any of the heat caused by its internal components.
Isn't Jobs famous for prioritising the aesthetic of a product over the functionality of it?
Yeah, usually to the detriment of the final product's quality. My favourite example of that being why iPhone screens break so easily. It's because the company who makes the glass, Corning, Gorilla Glass, which is basically the screen of every phone in existence, every time they make a breakthrough, they noted that when Steve Jobs was alive, he'd respond by making the screens thinner. So they could realistically make a phone these days where the screen would never fucking crack. But the problem is that phone would be a few millimetres thicker than it needed to be, and Steve Jobs wasn't about that life. So every time they made a breakthrough in glass technology, smartphone companies, and Apple in particular, would respond by making the phone thinner. It's like, oh, we can have it exactly the same strength as before. And it's, yeah, but it's still prone to scratches and breaks. But if you make it a millimetre or so thicker, it'll be able to, survive anything. No, fuck that. Millimetre thinner, you say? As shitty as that idea of form over function was, it did sometimes result in quite ingenious design solutions being made. My favourite example of that being the first iPod, which Steve Jobs, when he saw a prototype, got enraged at because it was too big and bulky, and he told engineers flatly, make it smaller. Apple engineers said we can't make the iPod smaller, and Steve Jobs said, really? Hand it here. And they handed him the prototype iPod, and he walked over to a fish tank in his office and dropped the iPod in, and looked and said, there's some air bubbles coming out there. If there's air, there's space. Get rid of it. I don't think anyone out there is going to argue that's not a fairly ingenious way of highlighting to engineers there is a way to make this device smaller. And obviously that inspired them to go out and remove that empty space. The same way that they were inspired to come up with an alternative solution to cooling down computers when Steve Jobs insisted on there being no fans or vents.
So what was the solution that they found?
Well, Apple engineers eventually settled on creating a heat sink at the bottom of the computer composed of aluminium, or aluminium to you Americans out there. It's to draw heat away from the internal components without the use of a fan or a vent, which was a fairly ingenious solution, but it did make the computer quite heavy and did result in that base bit getting incredibly hot, since its entire point was to draw heat away and disperse it into your desk. Which is not probably a good thing. Have you ever put down a pizza box on a freshly varnished table or out like that, and you pick it up and there's a big stain underneath? Can you imagine putting the Apple III on a desk, a wooden desk, and picking it up after the fact and going, oh, you've warped all the wood, this thing's useless now. And I imagine after that you just get a note from Apple saying, no, you're just using the computer wrong. All those people this iPhone doesn't get any signal, and they released an official statement saying you're holding your phone wrong. Because when you held it, left-handed people, when they held it, would put the hand over the antenna or some shit, so left-handed people couldn't make calls on one of the iPhones. And their official response was, you're holding it wrong.
Surely that was the perfect opportunity to release a left-handed phone.
If they did, I'd guarantee you it'd sell. It's ridiculous. But the idea of, you're holding this wrong, how up your own arse as a company do you have to be? No, we're going to make it run entirely silent by just putting on this giant aluminium base. That's going to be balls hot constantly after even a tiny amount of use. As you can imagine, given that this computer had, as noted, a 100% failure rate, this solution didn't really work, and the heat caused by that heat sink would result in the internal components of the Apple III popping out of place. Luckily, Apple had an amazing solution to this problem for users who experienced it.
What was this amazing solution?
Pick up the entire computer and drop it on the floor.
Try it now.
I'm guessing that's a joke from your part saying it's so shit, just get rid of it.
No, an actual, official Apple spokesperson told users of the Apple III, if you experience any issues with the Apple III, a solution to these problems might be to, and I quote, lift the entire computer 6 inches off the desk and drop it into place. The idea there being that dropping the computer resulting in those internal components that popped out of place, popping back into place thanks to the force exerted.
That's worse than when you bang something to try and make it work better.
What, percussive maintenance? That's a real thing.
There's a term for it.
Well, that's the term engineers use to describe banging something till it works, to make it sound more like, technical and official. Percussive maintenance, folks. So for people watching this who have an Apple product in their pocket, remember a couple of years ago an official solution to fixing one of the the flagship products of the brand was drop it on the floor. Think about that the next time you drop it slightly on your soft bed and you shit yourself thinking the screen's cracked. Holy shit. Just the balls to say that. It reminds me of when I was in IT once. We had an IT teacher who wasn't that great. And someone did that thing on your computer screen where you can flip it upside down.
Yeah.
And the teacher went, and it's one of those big, giant, fat PC screens. And he just went, fuck this, turned the screen upside down and left it as it was. Because he couldn't be arsed fixing it.
I'm assuming, seeing as he had it at 100% failure rate, there must have been other things wrong with it as well.
Yeah, in addition to overheating every single time it was turned on, which risked components popping out of place, other components were soldered in too aggressively into the machine to stop this from happening, which resulted in them short-circuiting all the time. And then you compare this to the Nokia 3210.
Oh, you mean that
Just compare it to Mjolnir of phones. It's have you heard the shit that Nokia does to their phones to test them? No. They put them in a drawer filled with thousands of sharp pointy pieces of plastic, and that drawer just gets shook about for 3.5 hours to simulate a lifetime of a phone being put in and out of your pocket with keys and coins and shit like that. And then they put them in a machine that bakes them, and one that freezes them, then one that simulates the jungles of the Orient. Because they say, if you buy a Nokia phone in a city, who's to say you're not going to go to a desert and then immediately go to a jungle and then go to the Arctic? Our phones need to work in every single location imaginable. And then another one that cracks me up is it's called the Gorilla Test, which is what all Nokia phones go through after all the other tests, which is basically where they give it to an engineer and say, try and pull it apart with your bare hands. And give them 10 minutes to do that. Basically just smash it on a desk.
Yeah.
You'd hand it to a gorilla and see what they do with it. And they take that and they look for structural weaknesses. We know our products are supposed to be durable, so they test them like this. And they're and then you compare it to Apple, and you see all those people walking around with a cracked screen. It's really, man.
I saw it on the train recently. I can't believe
it's
people
25%.
do that.
25% of all smartphone owners have got a cracked screen. As you'd expect, given everything we've talked about today, the Apple III sold worse than an Xbox in Japan, and 20% of all the units sold had to be replaced when they failed outright because they sucked harder than a blowjob in the vacuum of space. So the next time you see Apple announce a new product, just remember that one time in history they released a computer so bad it failed literally 100% of the time. We touched briefly on the Nokia 3210 in this video, and I love the Nokia 3210 because obviously it's a device known for its durability. So in that vein, Brad, is there any product you've owned over the years in which you've been surprised at how long it lasted?
I've always been surprised at how long my consoles lasted.
Yeah, older ones last fucking ages, don't they?
Even though I mentioned that my PS3 broke, it lasted 10 or so years of use.
And how long has your PS2 lasted?
Well, longer than that.
It still works, yeah. My PS2 still sat at home.
The only thing with my PS2 is it no longer plays PS1 games.
But it's okay, because you can borrow my PS1 player. Doesn't that crack you up about my PS2 is just sat there with a copy of Juiced in it, waiting for me to go pink slip TK, and my PS1's still there with Final Fantasy 8 Disc 3 in it, so I can go beat Ultimecia. It's I'm coming. One day I'll do it. I just ain't got time yet. Even my SNES is sat there with my half-completed, file save of Super Metroid on it when I'm trying to go for 100%. Just there. I'll save them. I'll
Just
save
waiting
them
for the
eventually.
glorious return.
It's waiting, yeah, they're all there, and it's all still on the thing. It's like, even my old Game Boy still works, man. I booted it up the other day when I was at home, like my old copy of Pokemon Ruby, that's at my mum's house. I booted it up and it's still got all my Pokemon on there. So, oh wow, cool, there's my Shedinja, nice one. So yeah, consoles last fucking ages, up until around like the Xbox 360 era, where I think there's just too many moving parts inside for like, to guarantee that something won't go wrong eventually.
Yeah.
Whereas like PS2s, they're just a workhorse, like, they'll go on forever. It's like, oh man, my GameCube's still knocking about. It's like, oh man, I've still got my Def Jam Fight for New York save on there. My 100% save, where it's just me with like wearing like a sideways baseball cap with like tribal tattoos down one arm. So I thought that was cool back in the day.
Somewhere around here, I've got this old handheld console that still works.
Oh my god, you got one of those pieces of shit. Don't tell me it's a Mr. Game & Watch. Even I'm not that nostalgic.
Oh, here it is. There you go. Have a look at that.
Oh my god, it's one of those things that looks like a calculator. It's one of those things you get like the seaside for £3 with like a fishing game on it, innit? Old technology has a weight to it that modern technology doesn't tend to have. It's like when I pick up my PS3 controllers and it's like, oh, it just feels light. But then you compare it to like the PS2 DualShock analog, it's like, there's some weight to this bastard. Or the Xbox 360 controller, not the wired one where you put the batteries in and you put rechargeable batteries in, it's like, there's some weight on this bastard. If I clock someone on this and they beat me at FIFA, they're going down.
See, I realised when we mentioned in a previous video, like last week I think it was, about me having a Master System.
Yeah.
It was the Master System 2 I had, and I forgot that the controllers are little squares.
Oh, man.
They're so clunky.
I try and, like my SNES, I boot it up every now and again to like play some Super Metroid or a bit of like Mario Kart. And my big gorilla hands can't fit around those fucking controllers. I had to buy like a third-party controller that actually fit, because I can't get my hands, it's like that.
Well, the original Xbox controller was gigantic.
Oh, the Duke. The Duke. The one we got. You can't forget, though, the white and black buttons. Because they didn't want to put on R1, L1. They put on the white and black button in Halo. That's how you turn your torch on. It's bullshit, man.